The Velareth Dominion had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had crushed 37 species beneath their boots. They had burned worlds and broken empires. When their warships appeared in a system, entire civilizations surrendered before a single shot was fired. Their name was Death itself, whispered in fear across 4 spiral arms of the galaxy. High Commander Thixis stood on the bridge of his flagship, the eternal silence, and looked at the blue marble floating in the darkness of space. Earth, home of the species called humans. His intelligence officers had studied them for decades. They were young, barely crawling out of their own solar system. They fought among themselves constantly. They had no unified government, no planetary defense grid, nothing that could stand against the might of the Dominion. They would fall in days, perhaps hours. Thixis activated the communication array and broadcast his declaration of war. His words were translated into every human language. They promised destruction. They demanded surrender. They gave humanity 30 standard cycles to submit or face complete annihilation. He leaned back in his command chair and waited for the terror to begin. On Earth, the transmission arrived at exactly 3:47 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. It was picked up by a government monitoring station buried in the mountains of Colorado. The station existed to watch for exactly this kind of thing, though nobody who worked there actually expected it to happen. Linda Marsh was on duty that night. She was 52 years old, had worked at the station for 15 years, and had spent most of her shift watching videos on her phone while the computers did their job. When the alert came through, she almost ignored it. They got false alarms all the time. Space was full of weird signals, but this one was different. The computer had flagged it as a structured transmission. Language. Actual language from somewhere beyond the solar system. Linda put down her phone and read through the translated message. Then she read it again. Then she sighed heavily and reached for her coffee. Another one, she muttered to herself. This was not, in fact, the first alien threat humanity had received. There had been 3 others over the past decade. Strange transmissions promising doom and demanding submission. None of them had ever amounted to anything. Linda had filed them all under alien threats and moved on with her life. She forwarded the message to her supervisor with a note explaining what it was. Then she went back to her phone. There was a new episode of her favorite show, and she wanted to finish it before her shift ended. The message sat in her supervisor's inbox for 3 days before anyone looked at it. When they finally did, it got forwarded up the chain of command, where it sat in another inbox for another week. Eventually, it reached someone who decided it should probably be investigated, but there was no rush. These things never turned out to be real. Meanwhile, the world continued to spin. People went to work. Kids went to school. A football championship drew 200 million viewers. A pop star released a new album that broke streaming records. Someone posted a picture of a cat that looked like a former president, and it became the most shared image in internet history. Nobody noticed that they were at war. Hi. Commander Thixis noticed that nobody noticed. He sat on his bridge, watching his sensors, waiting for the panic that never came. He expected military mobilization. He expected emergency broadcasts. He expected something. Instead, he received a single automated reply from somewhere on Earth. It said, "Your message is important to us. Please hold." Thixis stared at the words for a long time. He had conquered civilizations that spanned star systems. He had brought emperors to their knees. He had never been put on hold. His second-in-command, Fleet Admiral Vornis, approached carefully. "High Commander, our scouts report no change in human military readiness. Their defense satellites remain in standard configuration. Their fleets have not mobilized. Their population centers show no signs of evacuation. "They are planning something," Thixis said. "They must be. No species would ignore a declaration of war from the Dominion. Perhaps they did not receive the transmission? They received it. The automated response confirms this." Vornish shifted uncomfortably. "Then perhaps they do not understand it. Our translation algorithms may have failed." Thixis considered this. It was possible. Human languages were strange and complicated. But his translation systems had never failed before. They had been tested on thousands of species. "Send it again," he ordered. "Use all frequencies. Make sure they understand." The second transmission went out. It was clearer this time, more direct. It promised specific consequences. It named specific targets. It made absolutely certain that humanity understood what was coming for them. This time, the transmission was picked up by several news networks. A few stations ran it as a curiosity piece, a strange signal from space that probably meant nothing. Internet forums debated whether it was real or an elaborate hoax. A few people started making jokes about it online. Nobody panicked. Nobody prepared. Nobody seemed to care very much at all. In the Colorado monitoring station, Linda Marsh filed the second transmission in the same folder as the first. "Persistent," she noted in her report. But still probably nothing. Thixis received no response. Not a surrender. Not a defiant rejection. Not even an acknowledgement that humanity knew they were about to be invaded. Just silence and the endless noise of human entertainment broadcasts leaking into space. He had waited long enough. If humanity would not surrender, they would be conquered. If they would not fear him, they would learn to fear him. "Prepare the invasion fleet," he ordered. "We begin the conquest of Earth." Vornish saluted and went to carry out the command. Behind him, Thixis stared at the blue planet on his view screen. The head-broken species that had ruled galaxies. He had crushed armadas that darkened the stars. Humanity was nothing compared to them. A young, divided, distracted species with primitive technology and no real military strength. And yet something bothered him. Something about their silence. Something about the way they simply continued with their lives as if the most powerful military force in the galaxy had not just promised to destroy them. It was probably nothing, he told himself. They were simply too primitive to understand the threat they faced. They would learn soon enough. He had no way of knowing that humanity's greatest weapon was not their ships or their soldiers or their technology. It was something far more dangerous. Something the Velarith had never encountered in 10,000 years of conquest. Complete and utter indifference. The Velarith scout fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human territory. 12 warships, each one capable of leveling a city. They had been sent ahead to test human defenses, to probe their weaknesses, to report back on the best strategies for invasion. Fleet Captain Vornish commanded the mission personally. He was eager to prove himself. The High Commander had given him this honor, and he would not fail. His sensors detected a human installation on one of the moons of Jupiter. A mining operation, small and isolated. The perfect target for their first engagement. The fleet moved into attack position. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Vornish prepared to broadcast his demands. On the mining station, nobody had any idea what was happening. Danny Blake was having a bad day. The coffee maker was broken again. Someone had left a filter dirty, and now half his crew was arguing about whose fault it was. They had a shipment deadline in 3 days, and he did not have time for this nonsense. "I don't care who did it," he said for the 4th time. "Just clean it and make new coffee. We've got work to do." His communications officer, a young woman named Paula Grant, interrupted him. "Boss, we've got something weird on the sensors." "How weird?" "Ships, a lot of them. They don't match anything in our database." Danny walked over to her station and looked at the screen. 12 objects arranged in a formation around the station. He squinted at them for a moment. "Huh," he said. The communication array crackled to life. A harsh voice spoke in heavily accented English, demanding immediate surrender. The voice promised death to all who resisted. It claimed to represent something called the Velarith Dominion. Danny listened to the whole message. Then he rubbed his eyes and checked the time. It was way too early for this. "Paula, is this some kind of prank?" "I don't think so, boss. Those ships are definitely real." Danny sighed. He keyed his communicator and broadcast a response. "Yeah, hang on a second. We're in the middle of something here." Then he muted the channel and turned back to his crew. "Okay, forget the coffee maker for now. We apparently have guests. Someone want to tell me what's going on?" Nobody had any answers. They were miners, not soldiers. They extracted ore from asteroids and sent it back to Earth. They had no weapons, no defenses, nothing that could stand against a military fleet. "Should we be worried?" asked Greg Patterson, one of the drill operators. Danny looked at the ships on the screen. They were big and scary looking, but they were not actually doing anything. Just sitting there, waiting. "Probably," he admitted. "But worrying isn't going to help. Paula, can you send a message to Earth? Let them know what's happening?" "Already on it. Signal will take about 40 minutes to reach them." "Great. In the meantime, we've got a deadline." Everyone back to work. The crew stared at him. "You want us to keep working?" Greg asked. "With hostile aliens parked outside? You see them attacking? They're just sitting there. Until they actually do something, we've still got a job to do. Now move." The crew exchanged uncertain looks, but they followed orders. They always did. Danny had been running this station for 8 years, and he had never let them down. If he said work, they worked. On the Velarith flagship, Captain Vornis watched in complete confusion. His demands had been ignored. The humans had not surrendered, had not fled, had not even responded properly. They had told him to hang on a second, and then gone back to whatever they were doing. "They are not taking us seriously," his tactical officer observed. "That much is obvious," Vornis replied. "What are they doing?" The sensors showed human activity around the nearby asteroids. Mining equipment activating. Vehicles moving. The tiny figures of humans in spacesuits floating between rocks. They were working. In the face of imminent death, they were continuing their jobs as if nothing was happening. Vornis did not understand it. Fear was universal. Every species they had ever encountered had shown fear when faced with Velarith weapons. It was a fundamental survival instinct. Yet these humans seemed completely immune. Perhaps they do not understand the threat, his officer suggested. Then we will demonstrate. Vornis powered his weapon systems and prepared to fire up. Warning shot across the station's bow. Then, his sensors screamed. The human mining equipment had activated. Not the drills, not the transport vehicles. The cutting lasers. Great beams of focused light designed to slice through solid rock, now pointed directly at the Velarith fleet. Vornis ran the numbers. The power output of those lasers was enormous, far beyond anything his shields could handle. One hit from those beams would cut his ship in half. "They're aiming at us," his tactical officer reported, voice suddenly nervous. "I can see that. Orders, Captain?" Vornis stared at the screen. The humans had not fired. They had not even acknowledged the threat. They had simply activated their equipment and gone back to work, carving up asteroids with weapons that could destroy his entire fleet. It could not be intentional. They were miners, not soldiers. They probably did not even realize what they were doing, but Vornis was not willing to bet his life on that assumption. "Pull back," he ordered. "Maintain observation distance." We need to report this to the High Commander. The fleet retreated. The humans did not pursue. They did not celebrate. They did not even seem to notice that Danny Blake finished his shift, filed his reports, and went to bed. The alien ships were still out there somewhere, but they were not his problem. Someone on Earth would deal with it eventually. He had quotas to meet Dot in his report to High Command. Captain Vornis described the encounter in detail. He noted the human indifference. He noted the terrifying power of their mining equipment. He recommended caution. High Commander Thixis read the report 3 times. He had never heard of anything like this. A species that used planet-cracking weapons for routine industrial work. A species that treated military fleets like minor annoyances. Either humans were incredibly brave, or they were completely insane. Thixis was beginning to suspect it was the latter. But that only made them more dangerous. A sane enemy could be predicted. A sane enemy could be reasoned with. An insane enemy was capable of anything. He ordered a full strategic review. The invasion would continue, but they would need to be more careful than he had originally planned. Far away, on the mining station around Jupiter, the coffee maker was finally fixed. The message from the Jupiter mining station eventually reached Earth. It bounced through several relay satellites, got stuck in a processing queue for 6 hours, and finally landed on the desk of someone who was supposed to care about this sort of thing. Carl Patterson was 44 years old and worked for the Office of Extraterrestrial Affairs. This was not a job he had wanted. It was a job nobody wanted. The office had been created 5 years ago after the first strange signals from space, and it had done almost nothing since then. Carl had been assigned to it because he lost a bet with his supervisor, and because someone had to fill the position. He read the report from the mining station. Then he read the original alien transmission that had been forwarded to him weeks ago. Then he leaned back in his chair and wondered what he was supposed to do about any of this. The protocol said he should call a meeting. So he called a meeting. The conference room filled with people from different government agencies. Representatives from the State Department, the Defense Department, NASA, and several other organizations whose purposes Carl did not entirely understand. They all looked confused. None of them knew why they were there. So, Carl began, pulling up the alien transmission on the big screen. It appears we're being invaded. Diane Morrison from the State Department raised her hand. Invaded by whom? Aliens. They call themselves the Velorith Dominion. And they want to conquer us? That's what the message says, yes. Diane made a note on her tablet. Huh, and this is real? Our mining station near Jupiter had direct contact with their ships. So it seems to be real. The room went quiet. People looked at each other. Nobody seemed to know what to say. Kevin Park from the Defense Department finally spoke up. Well, I guess we should probably do something about that. Everyone nodded. Doing something seemed appropriate. What do you suggest? Carl asked. Kevin thought about it. We could form a committee. There were more nods around the room. A committee was a good idea. Committees were how things got done. Or at least how things got discussed until everyone forgot about them. The committee would need to study the issue, Diane added. Gather information. Consult experts. That sort of thing. How long would that take? Carl asked. 18 months. Maybe 2 years. These things can't be rushed. Carl wrote that down. 18 months to 2 years. By then, the aliens might have given up and gone home. Problem solved. The meeting ended with everyone feeling like progress had been made. Reports would be written. Subcommittees would be formed. Someone would eventually figure out what to do. Meanwhile, the Velorith Dominion was not waiting for committees. High Commander Thixis had chosen his first major target. A human colony on a planet called Proxima Centauri b, about 4 light-years from Earth. The colony was small, maybe 12,000 people, but it would serve as an example. Once the humans saw what happened to those who resisted, they would surrender. The invasion force was massive. 200 warships, 50,000 ground troops, enough firepower to conquer civilizations 10 times this size. Thixus was not taking any chances after the report from Jupiter. The fleet arrived in orbit around the colony world. The warships took up positions. The troop transports prepared to land. Below, in the main settlement, the colonists saw the alien ships appear on their sensors. The colony had no military. They were farmers mostly. They grew coffee beans in special greenhouses designed for the low gravity. Their coffee was famous across human space. It was the only thing the colony was famous for. The colony administrator was a woman named Betty Price. She was 63 years old and had retired to Proxima after 30 years as a marine engineer. She had built ships that crossed solar systems. She had managed construction projects with thousands of workers. She had never run a military operation in her life, but she had never backed down from a challenge either. "Call a town meeting," she told her assistant. "Everyone needs to be there." The meeting was held in the colony's main assembly hall. It was usually used for concerts and community events. Today, it was standing room only. Every person in the colony who could walk was there. Betty stood at the front and explained the situation. Alien ships in orbit. Demands for surrender. Possible invasion. What do we do? Someone shouted from the crowd. "We have two choices," Betty replied. "Surrender and hope they treat us well. Or fight. Fight with what? We're farmers." Betty smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We're humans. We'll figure something out." The vote was taken. It was unanimous. They would fight. Nobody liked the idea of surrender. Nobody trusted aliens who showed up with warships and made threats. The only argument was about who would lead the defense. Betty wanted the job. But so did Hank Coleman, a former construction foreman who thought he knew better. They argued about it for 20 minutes. Finally, someone suggested flipping a coin. It was a stupid way to decide something so important, but nobody had a better idea. Betty won the coin flip. "All right," she said, addressing the crowd. "Here's what we're going to do. I want every engineer in the colony to report to me in 1 hour. Every pilot, every mechanic, everyone who knows how to make things work." "What about the rest of us?" asked Maria Santos, one of the farmers. "You're going to learn. We don't have soldiers, but we have smart people and good equipment. That's going to have to be enough." The colony went to work. Engineers studied the alien ships, looking for weaknesses. Farmers learned to operate equipment they had never touched before. Children helped organize supplies because they were the only ones who understood the new inventory system. In orbit, the Velarith invasion force prepared to land. They expected minimal resistance. They expected fear and chaos. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Betty Price watched the alien ships from her office window. She had built things all her life. Ships, stations, entire communities. Now she was going to have to break something instead. She did not like it, but she would do what needed to be done. "Come on, men," she muttered to the ships above. "Let's see what you've got." The first wave of Velarith troops landed at dawn. They came down in armored dropships, 20 soldiers in each one. Their weapons were designed to tear through stone and metal. Their armor could stop bullets and energy beams. They had conquered 50 worlds using exactly these tactics, and they had never failed. The landing zone was a flat field outside the main colony settlement. The Velarith commander, a veteran named Thrix, stepped out of his dropship and surveyed the area. Empty, silent, no defenders in sight. "They are hiding," he told his troops. "Search the buildings. Round up the civilians. This will be over quickly." His soldiers moved forward in perfect formation. They had trained for this. They knew exactly what to do. They did not know about the agricultural drones. Betty Price had spent the night reprogramming the colony's farming equipment. The drones were designed to spread seeds and fertilizer across large fields. They were small, quiet, and everywhere. Nobody had ever thought of them as weapons. Until now. The first drone hit the Velareth formation from above. It was carrying a fertilizer tank filled with a mixture of chemicals that Betty's engineers had put together in a hurry. When the tank exploded, it sprayed burning liquid across a dozen soldiers. The Velareth armor was designed to stop weapons fire. It was not designed for chemical attacks. The liquid ate through the outer layer like acid, and the soldiers inside screamed. More drones followed. Hundreds of them. They came from every direction, dropping their payloads and retreating before the Velareth could react. The perfect military formation dissolved into chaos. Commander Thrix shouted orders, but nobody could hear him over the explosions. His troops scattered, looking for cover that did not exist. The drones were too fast, too numerous. Every time they shot one down, two more appeared. Then the bulldozer arrived. Lou Martinez was 81 years old. He had been a farmer his whole life, and before that, an accountant. He had never fought anyone. He did not know how to use a weapon, but he knew how to drive heavy machinery. The bulldozer crashed into the Velareth formation at full speed. Lou had reinforced the front with metal plates from the colony's recycling center. It was not elegant, but it worked. Alien soldiers bounced off the blade like toys. Lou drove straight through the middle of the invasion force, scattering them in every direction. He was laughing the whole time. He had not felt this alive in years. "That's for my greenhouse," he shouted out the window. "You broke my tomato plants." The first wave retreated. Commander Thrix reported to the ships in orbit with obvious panic in his voice. He had lost 40% of his troops to farmers and farming equipment. He requested reinforcements. The second wave was larger. 200 soldiers, supported by armored vehicles. They would not be caught off guard again. Betty was waiting for them. Her engineers had made a discovery during the first battle. Velareth armor was vulnerable to certain chemicals. Specifically, the pesticides that the colony used to protect their crops. The same stuff they sprayed on plants to keep insects away made alien armor fall apart. Every spray canister in the colony had been collected and distributed. Farmers who had never held anything more dangerous than a pitchfork now carried improvised chemical weapons. The second wave landed in a different location, further from the settlement. They advanced cautiously, expecting an ambush. They got one. The colonists had dug trenches during the night. Not military trenches, just irrigation ditches repurposed for defense. They were filled with people armed with spray canisters and whatever tools they could find. Maria Santos, the farmer who had asked what she was supposed to do, was in the first trench. She had never been so scared in her life. But when the alien soldiers appeared, she stood up and started spraying. The pesticide hit the first soldier in the chest. His armor began to smoke, then crack, then fall away in pieces. He stumbled and fell, and Maria sprayed him again. All along the line, other colonists did the same. The Velareth soldiers were tough, trained for combat, equipped with superior technology. But they could not fight an enemy that dissolved their armor with bug spray. The second wave broke and ran. High Commander Tixis received the reports from Proxima Centauri with growing disbelief. 2 assault waves. Hundreds of soldiers. Defeated by farmers using agricultural equipment and household chemicals. His intelligence officers tried to explain. The humans were resourceful. They adapted quickly. They used whatever tools were available. They are farmers, Tixis said slowly. Farmers defeated 2 waves of Dominion soldiers. Yes, High Commander. How is this possible? The intelligence officers exchanged nervous looks. Finally, one of them spoke up. "We have conducted psychological analysis of the human species," he said carefully. "Our findings suggest that they are, by Dominion standards, completely insane." Insane? They do not respond to threats the way normal species do. They do not surrender when faced with superior force. They do not calculate their odds of survival and act accordingly. They simply fight, regardless of the circumstances. Thixis stared at the report for a long time. The Dominion had conquered 37 species. All of them had been rational. All of them had understood when they were beaten. All of them had surrendered when resistance became hopeless. Humans did not seem to understand that concept. "Increase the invasion force," he ordered. "If one colony is this difficult, we will need everything we have to take their homeworld." The order went out. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon the Dominion possessed would be brought to bear against Earth. On Proxima Centauri B, Betty Price sat in her office and wrote a message to Earth. She explained what had happened. She explained what they had learned. She explained how to fight back. Then she went to get some coffee. It had been a long night, and she had a feeling it was going to be an even longer war. But for the first time since the alien ships appeared, she was smiling. The full might of the Velarith Dominion descended on the Sol system like a storm across the stars. 8,000 warships. 2 million soldiers. Weapons capable of cracking planets and burning oceans. It was the largest military force the Dominion had ever assembled. High Commander Thixis had emptied every garrison, recalled every patrol fleet, gathered every available resource he would not underestimate. Humanity again. The fleet took up positions around Earth. The blue planet hung in space, surrounded by alien metal and alien weapons. From orbit, Thixis could see the lights of human cities, the movement of human ships, the constant activity of a species that did not know it was about to die. He broadcast his final demand: surrender, total and unconditional, or face extinction. On Earth, people noticed this time. The alien fleet was visible in the night sky, a constellation of new stars that had not been there the day before. News networks ran constant coverage. Governments held emergency meetings. The United Nations passed a resolution expressing deep concern. But mostly, life continued. People went to work. Children went to school. Stores stayed open. Traffic still filled the streets. The invasion was happening, yes, but it was happening up there in space. And that seemed very far away from the concerns of daily existence. The committee that Carl Patterson had formed finally released its preliminary findings. They recommended further study. Carl read the report, looked out his window at the alien ships hanging in the sky, and quietly updated his resume. Margaret Cole was 76 years old. She had been a schoolteacher for 40 years before retiring to a small house in Arizona. She had taught 3 generations of children. She had seen wars and disasters and political upheavals. She had lived through things that seemed like the end of the world and had always survived. She was not impressed by aliens. Margaret had a grandson who worked at the Regional Communication Center. Through a combination of luck, timing, and the fact that security protocols had completely broken down in the chaos, she managed to get access to the planetary communication array. She had something to say, and she was going to say it. Her broadcast reached every ship in the Velarith fleet. It was also picked up by every news network on Earth and eventually spread across the entire galaxy. It became the most replayed message in human history. "Now you listen here," Margaret said, her voice steady and sharp. "I don't know who you people think you are, showing up uninvited and making demands. We've got problems enough down here without you adding to them. You want a war? Fine, but you're going to have to wait in line behind climate change, the economy, and my grandson's wedding that I still haven't finished planning. She paused to take a breath. So either come down here and make yourselves useful, or go bother someone else. We've got things to do. High Commander Thixis listened to the message in stunned silence. His bridge crew stared at their consoles, unsure how to react. The most powerful military force in the galaxy had just been scolded by an elderly woman. What is wrong with these people? Thixis asked quietly. Nobody had an answer. The invasion began anyway. Troops landed in every major city. Ships bombarded military installations. The Velorith brought everything they had against humanity. Thought it was not enough. Thought the humans fought back with everything they had, which turned out to be quite a lot. Every factory became a weapons producer. Every engineer became an armorer. Every citizen became a soldier. But more importantly, they simply refused to be conquered. Velorith troops would take a city, declare victory, and move on. Behind them, the humans would immediately start resisting again. They sabotaged supply lines. They ambushed patrols. They made every occupied territory into a nightmare. The soldiers were not the problem. It was everyone else. Old women who poisoned food supplies. Children who spread false information. Office workers who deleted critical files. Nobody followed orders. Nobody accepted defeat. A year into the invasion, the Velorith controlled most of Earth's major cities on paper. In practice, they controlled nothing. Their troops were exhausted. Their supplies were running low. Every day brought new attacks, new problems, new evidence that humanity would never submit. High Commander Thixis had conquered 37 species. He knew what victory looked like. This was not a 2 years in. He began to consider options he had never considered before. His fleet was worn down. His army was demoralized. The Dominion's other territories were becoming restless, sensing weakness. He could not win this war. He could destroy humanity, perhaps. Burn their cities, poison their air, turn their world into a dead rock. But he could not conquer them. He could not make them obey. And destruction without conquest was pointless. After 3 years, Thixis requested a ceasefire. The humans agreed. Mostly because the paperwork was getting out of hand. The negotiations were strange. The Velorith had never negotiated with a conquered species before. They did not know how it worked. The humans did not seem to understand that they had lost, because in their minds, they had not lost. They had simply been fighting a particularly annoying war. In the end, the Velorith withdrew from human space. They returned to their empire, diminished and humiliated. The 37 species they had conquered watched in amazement as the mighty Dominion retreated from a single world. The galaxy would never be the same. On Earth, life returned to normal with surprising speed. The cities were rebuilt. The factories went back to making consumer goods. People complained about traffic and argued about politics and worried about their jobs. The war became history, then memory. Then just another story told in classrooms and documentaries. Margaret Cole finished planning her grandson's wedding. It was a lovely ceremony. Betty Price retired from the Proxima colony and moved back to Earth, where she wrote a book about the defense of Proxima that became a bestseller. Danny Blake kept running his mining station. He got a new coffee maker, one that nobody was allowed to touch except him. Carl Patterson left government work entirely and became a consultant. His business card said, Crisis Management Expert. And somewhere in the depths of space, High Commander Thixis sat alone in his quarters and wondered how he had lost a war to a species that never seemed to realize it was being fought. He never found an answer. Perhaps there was none. Perhaps humanity was simply impossible. A species that treated galactic conquest as a minor inconvenience. A species that fought back with coffee makers and bug spray and elderly school teachers. A species that, when war was declared, simply did not care. The galaxy had many empires, many conquerors, many powers that rose and fell across the millennia. But there was only one humanity dot, and that, perhaps, was enough.